Alright, in this episode I want to have some fun with the slider that we created the last episode. And particularly, we're going to take that slider and we're going to make it to where we can have it vertical as well. That sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? Well, hang on and we'll do that. But first, I want to point out something, and that is our buttons. They work all nice and well, except if I click out here and then I come into the button, you see how it highlights? And then if I were to let go in the button, so it activates the button, even if I click outside and then come in. And I don't want that behavior. So I want to fix that. That's kind of what I would consider to be a bug. So let's check how we're doing some of this stuff here over in the button update function. Gee, how quaint. What we're going to do is we're going to use the color, and we're going to use it to figure out if we should invoke the button click event. So right now we just say if the previous button was a left click and it's not currently a left click and we're in bounds, then we invoke the on button click event. Well, that's not quite what we want to do. We also want to say we're going to, like I said, we're going to use the color to indicate sort of what state we're in. So we want to know if the color was self.pressed. And if it is, then we'll invoke this event. And then that's why we moved this down here, so that we can check self.color before we do this. Now we're going to have to do a couple of additional things. And that is right here, we have if inbounds and left click. So that still will allow us to come in and hold down the left click button and then pop inbounds, and we get this self-pressed color. So I mean, we could have that, I guess. But you see, now no longer do we get this. See, when we let go of, we let go of it on there. But now if we click and then we move off, then we're good. But we still have this, which I don't like that. So let's fix that also. So if we're in the inbounds of our button, and we get where our left click is down, and we don't have a self.previous left click, then we'll put the color to pressed. You see, that means that initial click basically that I have there, if I click out here and I go in, see, it no longer works, and then I can let go, then it'll highlight. So I can highlight, click, you see, but we're still not working exactly like we're supposed to, because we click and that color goes away, which isn't what we want. We actually want the pressed color there. So we're going to need to also make this a conditional, and we'll say else if not inbounds. So if we're not inside of that little rectangular region that is our button, then we're going to set the color to normal. So let's check that out. So this is all working like we should, and then I'll press down here, move around, and then I'll let go in here, and then, okay, now I'm going to click in there. That is the behavior that I want. So with that, our button should now be good. Now let's see about making our slider one that we can make a horizontal or a vertical slider. We could separate these out and have a horizontal and a vertical slider, but a lot of the code is the same. So I'd rather not do that. What I want to do is, one of the things I want to do is this slider width. When we have a horizontal slider, the slider width makes sense because it is the width, will be the width of our slider. And again, you can do what you want here, but I'm always setting the height of the slider to the height, the slider knob or whatever you want to call it, to be the height of our actual slider UI control. So, but instead, since we're going to do a horizontal or vertical slider, this will become just that other size. So if it's a horizontal slider, this will be the slider width. If it's a vertical slider, this will be the slider height. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just going to call this, I'm going to rename it throughout all of my code. and I'm going to call it slider size. So that just means the dimension, either width or height, that we need for our slider, depending on whether it's vertical or not. So now, in order to indicate whether we're vertical, let's add another parameter, and we'll call it isVertical. And we'll need to store that. So we'll say isVertical, and we'll say isVertical. Something else I want to do, this slider X delta, we're going to have a delta, but it's not going to be an X delta necessarily, because if it's vertical, it'll be a Y delta. So I want to rename this also, and I want to call it just plain old slider delta. Makes sense, hopefully. So let's do this. Or false. Hopefully that makes sense. Probably don't really need to do that, but I want to make sure that it's absolutely a true or a false value, and that's how we can do that. So now we have this vertical property. So what we probably should do, first of all, is actually, you know what we should do first? Let's go add one of these sliders, and we'll just call it, we'll call this one test, because test is a wonderful thing to say. And let's say we'll put it 20 pixels from the left, and we'll make it 40 pixels from the top, so its upper left hand corner will be 2040. And then instead of a width of 125, we'll make a width of 40, and then we'll have we can still have a height of 200. That's fine. And then we want to say, yes, it is a vertical slider. And we will also change the name, come down here and add it into our entities. So now we have a vertical slider. And if we run this, we should see no difference, but we should instead see two sliders sort of sitting right here. And we see the piece of one here. Okay. Actually, that's kind of interesting. Let me turn that off and see what happens. All right. Yeah, that makes sense, because if slider's only 40, it's 200. Yeah, all right. So now we've got a vertical slider added in here with this true. Now we can go back and let's try to draw the slider correctly. So we'll come back down here, and really there's something else we need to look at, and that is this groove. I call it the groove, the slider groove. Right now I'm setting it to a width of 5, but I'd like to be able to also be able to control its size if I want to. So let's set a groove size, and I want to set that to 5 right here, so that way I can change it and I know exactly what that is. I don't, having just plain old numbers like that around your code without knowing exactly kind of what they are, that can be troublesome. Something else I want to do, I've noticed that these rectangles, I've got these corner radiuses, radii on them, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to set, let me go and check that let's see, Love2D.org. Pin this over here to the side, and we will say wiki, and I want to go to love.org. Actually, I don't need to do that. I can use my tool and hit F2. I will get, well, it didn't work too well. It's the wrong browser. But I can grab that link. We'll just paste it in here. Easier that way. All right. So we have right here. So the x-axis radius of each corner, and the y-axis radius of each round corner. Let's mess around here, because we have the x-axis, and perhaps we don't want, we can leave it at 1, I suppose. Let's see what this does. And we'll look at our little, yeah, let's do this. See what happens if we do this. I'm not real satisfied with how that looks. Looks like 1 is kind of the default. If we were to go to 2.2, what does that look like? That's not bad. No, that looks pretty good. That looks actually really nice. See, it's all rounded. As before, if you remember, it wasn't. 4.4 wasn't very good. That's also probably related to this. Will be related to the size of the groove. But for now, we'll just leave it at 2. Yeah, we'll just leave it at 2 for now. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, something else that I wanted to point out, and that is, I'll run it again. If you look, we said this was centered, but it's actually not quite centered. If you check it, it's not exactly centered. So the reason is we really need to also subtract groove size. Yeah, from our, it's actually groove size divided by 2, I believe. So we're just kind of fixing this one up. Yeah, and notice that when we go, also there's another issue. When we go out, if I just mouse over it once without clicking, then it's given us this highlight. If inbounds and not left click. So we want to say else if inbounds and left click, and then we want to say else self.color equals self.normal. See if we fix that little area, that little error. Yeah, see, we still have it normal. We can let it go. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, good. That's weird. That looks a little odd there. Let me bump up the groove size and let's see if that helps at all. Just 1. We'll bump it up 1. Yeah, look, see? That looks a lot better. I'm going to leave it at 6. I think it looks okay that way. And again, we can change these colors. You can change these colors to your heart's content. And we could actually make a method that would change those colors. But for now, we're just getting some stuff going, right? Okay. So, let's now check if self.isVertical. Then we're going to do something. Otherwise, it's going to be a regular horizontal slider. And the horizontal slider is going to do these things here. As you can see, that was the standard thing that we've always been doing, right? Okay, so the new vertical slider will draw slightly differently, or draw, depending on how you want to speak. So the vertical slider will now draw like this. It will draw, instead of in the middle of the height, we will now draw in the middle of the width. So we must say plus, since we're on the left-hand corner, we'll say plus self.width divided by 2. That will put us in the middle of our area. And oh yes, and also we'll need to say minus groove size divided by 2. And then self.position.y will be the upper left-hand corner, just like before, but it would be the instead of the left side and middle left, this will be centered top, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't. All right, so instead of the self.width here, we'll have the groove. No, we will have, yeah, we want the groove width, the groove size here. We want the groove size here. Groove size. And then here we want the height, because the height is going to define how long the groove itself is. And then with our rectangle, our little control rectangle, our little slider, actual slider, this slider position will now be put over here. But this is going to be interesting because when it's at the lower position, we want that position to be 0. So basically what we want to do is we want to add the height to this position so that we start down, because that would be value of 0, right? If that, and then we would also say we also want to say minus slider size, because we want that slider to go past the end of the height. And then instead of the slider size, we want to set the width of this control knob to the width of the control. And then instead of the height, we will set this to the slider size. Slider size. Let's see what that does. And hopefully that does something. And it kind of does, but we can't see everything because we don't have. There's some things that we don't have that are not correct, I suppose. So we have self dot, oh yes, and we also must put here, this is where we need to put self dot slider delta minus. Or not slider delta, it's actually slider, is that what I'm calling it? I'm calling it slider delta? No. I want slider position, not slider delta. Forgive me. Slider position. Yes. So that will give us a slider position that will go kind of reverse of it will actually make it, it'll make it work right. So yeah, let's run that one more time. And I have a small little, and he's still not correct, so that means that my this, we could just, let's do this, is vertical. I just must have done that wrong. Let's try this. And indeed I did. See, there it is. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing. It's amazing. Interesting though. Why that wouldn't work. Shouldn't that work? Because basically it's horizontal there. And in main menu I set that to true. And his vertical is true. Oh well. For now we'll just do this. Basically that means that it can be set to nothing. That's fine for now. It works. All right. I know. That's not exactly. Could it be and true or false? Doesn't make sense, does it? Hello. That looks correct. Okay. So is vertical and true, which should be true if it is vertical, otherwise it's false. So whatever, that works. Now, the next part will be in the slider update. So we're going to have to change some things here. So we have our mouse X and Y, our left click, and is in bounds. This is going to be different depending on whether it is vertical or not. So let's do this. False. And then we'll say inbounds equals, and we're basically going to differentiate between these two. So we'll say if self.isVertical do this, else, and of course right now they look the same because they are the same. That's fantastic, a wonderful thing, isn't it? So we're going to need to change this. This one is correct, but this one is not correct. So we're going to need to say, we're going to need to get rid of this. And that should be fine. That's the upper left corner. And this is the upper, I'm trying to think. We want the upper right corner of our slider, which will be self.height minus self.slider position minus slider size. Yeah, that's right. And I think minus slider, and then we would say self.width, and then we would put slider size here in the height, because that's how big our slider is. So we say that would be correct. X is going to be the same, and then but then our slider, our Y position is going to be self position dot Y plus the height minus the slider position minus the slider size. Yeah. I think that's correct. Excellent. Wonderful. Now, what we'll need to do now is we're going to need to change some of this. And we can remove these parentheses here. So, what we need to do here is instead of mx, we'll need to do my. So, we can say same if statement, and this is probably going to get a little more messy than I'd like for it to get, and maybe we'll come back and change this or make it better. I don't know. But this will work. It works, or it should work. We'll see. And so if it's vertical, we want my. We want the y component of the mouse. Okay. So now we're here. Now we have this chunk of code right here. And this is all going to have to change because we're going to be changing. Slider position is also going to depend on my instead of mx. So once again, as much as I hate to do it, for now we'll just do it this way. If self dot is vertical, then say end, and we'll put this under an else. Pow. Format it so it looks all nice and everything. So there, and then we'll take this chunk of code, put it under the vertical. We'll change a few things around. Now, I'm going to leave it like this, and then we'll go down here and we'll say if slider position is greater than self.height minus slider size, then self.slider position equals self.height minus slider size. Otherwise, if self.slider position is less than 0, then self.slider position equals 0. Okay. Let's see what happens when we run this. Can I grab it? Yes. No. But look, I'm going down and it's going up. Why is that? Well, think about it. We're moving this in the wrong direction because our my is negative when we go this way because we're going down. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going opposite of that. So what we could do, what we can do, and what we will, is we will negate it here. And when we negate it, that should make those negative values correct. How about that? We have a slider. But if you notice, when we click, initially, it always puts us right back down here. So what we need to do is we need to check this. All right, let's see. Oh, there's one thing we should look at, and that is how we created this slider here. The vertical slider would be X, Y, width, height, and label or ID. That is not right, so fix that. And really, what we really want from this delta is just how far away the mouse position is from our slider position. But this isn't really the global slider position, is it? The global slider position is self.y plus self.height minus that slider position. So that should give us the global delta. Then we'll need to come in here and we'll need to do the same thing, I believe. So we would take this right to here, and this, am I right? Click. Unable to perform arithmetic on field Y. Of course, because it's position.y, not Y. How many times has that bitten me? A few times. Okay, though, try this. All right, that's what we needed to do. We had it in local coordinates, and we needed to convert it to global coordinates. You see, it would have worked correctly if it was like this one, and we weren't inverting it, but we're actually inverting everything. And we probably could have done something along the lines of... We shouldn't try this. We probably could have done something along the lines of screen height. How do we do that? Love.graphics.get. I don't know, something. I'm not even going to try it. This works because we've converted to global. The delta is in global coordinates. And of course that makes sense because we want our delta, our position, to be in global coordinates also. And then we want to pull those back into the slider local coordinates, if you will, since we reversed this value. So you see now everything works wonderfully. Something else let's do really quickly because I think it would be fun to do, and that is let's add a label. Let's say self.label equals label, and let's put it, gosh, I don't even remember how big we have everything. Let's go with 400 and a y of, let's say 125, and let's say a size of 250, and a height of 40, and we'll just put 0. And then let's add that label to our collection here, see if it displays. It does. It's a little bit low, so let's put it to 115. That's still not good. Let's put it to 100. Probably going to be too high. A little bit too high. Let's do 105. Yes, 105. And we'll move it over also. Yes, that's much better. 105. And we'll do 350. Let's move it over 50. It's better. 325. I'd say 325. And what we'll do with this label is when we have the slider value changed, we'll say if slider.id equals volume, then we will say self.label.text equals slider get value. Can actually display something from our slider, which is of course what we want to be able to do. And we have a problem, which is that should be an end. I don't know why I typed an else, but it's okay. And if it works. And look at that. By Jove, I think he's got it. Let's do something else also. Our main menu, let's say label. And what was, okay, color. Color is fine, so we can say hue.gray. Oops. hue.gray 255, basically white, and we can say left aligned. So that way it will so we need to move it over since we're left aligned it. So we'll say 400. And will that work? No, just a little bit farther, ladies and gentlemen. 415 should work. Let's try a little 415. And nope, a little bit more. How about 425? 425. I think that's a good area. And boom. How about that? So we have sliders that actually work. Should we put a little indicator up here? Why not? Let's do it. It'll be lots of fun. So where's that slider? That slider's at 20, and that is the left-hand corner. So let's do that. And 40, so we'll do 20, 20. And what was that? The width? That's the width. We don't need a width that huge. We need a width of, say, maybe 60. And the height is fine. Left justificated. And we'll add our V label. Let's see what we have. Yes, we need to... Let's center this one. Center. We need to move it over some. We'll move it to 15. Oops, that's not the right one. We'll move it here. 15. $13. I know it doesn't have to be perfect, but 12. Probably more like 12 since that thing should be. I think that'll work. That'll work okay. So we are, let's see, I'll label test. Okay, so we can say else if then our self.vlabel.text equals slider.getValue. Now we have two sliders that are sending messages, and let's see if they both work. And not quite yet. Okay, let's see what we're... I'm going to get rid of that. Now, there were some other things I wanted to get rid of. This stuff here. And like we should be evoking those events. Invoking. Invoke. We have a self.vlabel, the V slider. Oh, of course. Let me just say test. Now we're good. We're gold now, ladies and gentlemen. Boom. And boom. But look, notice we're getting 700, which is the reason is because we are vertical and we haven't said anything about being vertical here. So we need to change that. If we're vertical, then we'll do this. But if we're horizontal, we'll do the following, which is self.slider position divided by self.height. Let's see what that does. Oh. And we've got it. Everything is good. Now we have vertical and horizontal sliders. And that's all I'm going to do today. And it's been a lot of fun. And we'll see you in the next episode next time.